For me, music was always the one thing that I enjoyed the most about life.
Chester Bennington's voice shook stadiums and defined a generation, propelling Linkin Park to worldwide fame with hits like In the End and Numb.
The award goes to Linkin Park.
But behind the powerful performances and massive success was the story of a fighter who poured his pain into music that would leave a lasting impact on the world.
And that's what I remember is this just like lightness, but then you'd hear him and it'd be like, this guy's got darkness.
This is the story of Chester Bennington. Chester Charles Bennington was born in Phoenix, Arizona on March 20th, 1976. His mom worked as a nurse and his dad was a police detective who handled tough cases involving child abuse. Bennington grew up the youngest of 4 children, but his childhood wasn't easy. His parents split when he was just 11, and after that, he was pretty much left on his own. He lived with his dad, but communication with his family was almost non-existent. Although he had siblings, they were rarely around, leaving Chester to navigate the tough times mostly by himself. In an interview with Kerrang!, Chester reflected on how tough his teenage years were after his family fell apart. My parents got divorced when I was 11. When my mom left, my whole family pretty much disappeared. My older brother and my older sister left home. My other sister, who's a little older than me, was hardly ever there. That left me and my dad, and he was working around the clock pulling double shifts. I was pretty much just left at home by myself. It was horrible. Chester was always open about the horrific challenges he faced as a child. In that same brutally honest Kerrang! Interview, he revealed the nightmare that began when he was abused as a kid. It started when I was about 7 or 8. It was by a friend who was a few years older than me. I was getting beaten up and being forced to do things I didn't want to do. It destroyed my self-confidence. I hated everybody in my family. I felt abandoned by my mom. My dad was not very emotionally stable, and there was no one I could turn to. The only thing I wanted to do was kill everybody and run away. The abuse lasted until he was 13, and later, he turned to drugs to try and escape the pain of that time.
I started using drugs, so I was exposed to it really, really young, and there was a lot of things that happened to me as a young person that were really difficult to deal with, and I found myself alone a lot, and so it was. I think that given the nature of a lot of the aspects of my childhood, when that first person offered me, an escape from reality, I kind of took it and I ran with it,
In high school, Chester was bullied badly. He shared in an interview that he was knocked around like a rag doll because he was skinny and didn't look like everyone else. With the kind of trauma he endured, it's almost inevitable that depression would take root. His painful past created the perfect storm for the darkness to grow.
It's not like, oh man, like I kind of like that, I'm just bummed. It's like, I don't want to do anything, and I don't feel like doing anything, and I don't like anything. Like there's no sunshine. For me, I've always kind of dealt with that my whole life, I've always had these kind of depressive side, and I think that's something I've never liked, but I've also never liked being anything. I don't like being I want to be happy, but when I'm in it, I try to get out of it. I don't like being sad. When I'm in it, I want to get out of it. I've never been comfortable just being. My whole life, I've just kind of felt a little off, and I find myself like getting into these patterns of like behavior or thought, and especially when I'm like stuck up here, I like to say that like this is like I heard somebody say this once and it like stuck with me, but this is like a bad neighborhood, you know what I mean? And I should not go walking alone.
Chester was undeniably a tortured soul, and he found a way to channel all of that pain into his music. His voice was amazing, effortlessly shifting from gentle tones to powerful screams. His songs often seemed like they gave an inside look at the struggle of mental illness. Chester himself said that when everything else in his life was falling apart, music was the only thing that kept him going.
The one I would say that music has probably kept me alive, more so than anything else. I mean, other than love from your friends and family, I think that you know, music is probably the reason why I still am here, because that is how I get out a lot of the stuff that's going on inside of me. And that's how I kind of work through a lot of things. I reflect on my life. I reflect on how I feel.
But his path to success was filled with dead ends. As a teenager, he sang in bands that went nowhere, leading to nothing but frustration. By 1998, he was done, ready to walk away from music for good. Things weren't happening. The grind had taken its toll, and Chester almost gave up on his dream. That is, until he auditioned for a group that would later become Linkin Park.
We went through a period where we kind of didn't know what we wanted to do with the band. Like the singer we had been playing with was transitioning out, and we didn't know if we wanted to continue. If we wanted to continue, if we wanted to continue just the 5 guys, or how that would even look or work out. And you know, we tried a bunch of different guys that were LA based and whatever, and nothing was really working, nothing we were excited about. But when we heard Chester's stuff that he had done, we were just like, okay, this guy can sing. We need to get him out here quick and see, you know, what the deal is. And got him out, and then said, okay, if a band is gonna work, this is gonna work. Otherwise, you know, that's the end of Linkin Park as it is, kind of thing.
Desk jobs, here we come.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember getting a call from a friend of mine who used to represent an old band of mine, saying that, you know, there was this great young group of guys that had this really great sound, and all they needed was that voice that was going to help them complete the puzzle. And you know, I had never really auditioned. The only time I'd ever auditioned to be in a band was when I was like 14. And so from 14 to 23, I had never auditioned. I was always the person that people were coming to audition for. And so it was a different experience for me, you know, because in my mind I was like doing these guys a favor. And you know, I wasn't the one who called them, you know, they were calling me. And so it was strange for me to think of it as me doing an audition, because I didn't go seek them out, which was the interesting thing. So when I got there and you know, turned over the tape, I had my vocals on it, everybody liked it. We seemed to get along pretty well, even though we were strangers. And I got to watch some other people like do their auditions, and it was pretty funny.
Long story short, he ends up in LA and he tries out. Well, we had lined up a few different tryouts that day, and you know, because we didn't know what the hell we were doing, like they were seeing each other on the way in and out, which is not a very nice thing to do. I wouldn't have done it that way if I did, you know, were to do it today. But the guy who was trying out after Chester heard Chester sing, and then he came in and he was basically like, I don't know if he said it to us or if he said it to Chester. He's like, if they don't pick you, they're crazy. Like one of the guys actually left. I think it was that guy. He just came in and he was like, I'm not even trying out. Like, if you guys don't pick that guy, you're insane. And he like left, and he told Chester the same thing.
It was a turning point for Chester. For the first time in his teenage life, his future looked promising, and things finally started to feel hopeful. The band wasn't happy with the material they had, so as soon as Chester joined, they got straight to work writing new songs. The Hybrid Theory EP was their first release with Chester on vocals.
Chester came out to LA just like having started in the band, and he was like kind of living out of his car and deciding, do I want to be in this band? Do they want me in this band? Like, how does it work? Before we'd started working together, Chester never really screamed on a song. He sang. He didn't like do what he ended up doing on Hybrid Theory. We discovered that together.
Talking about the EP, Mike Shinoda said, "It was a small project we put together when Chester first moved to California. It was the first time we were in the studio together. They promoted their music everywhere they could online, posting links to their songs on music forums, chat rooms, and even other bands' websites." Drummer Rob Borden shared, "I'd tell everyone in the band to recruit 5 or 6 people a day online. We'd go into Korn's chat rooms and say, check out this cool new band called Linkin Park, acting like we weren't actually in the band."
We're definitely a band that you can totally say, like, we kind of broke on the web. And the cool thing about that is when we first went to do a US tour, which we'd never done before, there were kids in all these different cities who already knew who we were because they'd heard our stuff on the internet, or they were on our street team, or they'd met someone.
It's really distracting, man.
We really rode that wave. Like, we were making fans directly on our street team over the internet. And like, that was like a new, I mean, it sounds so ridiculous, but that was like a new thing to do.
They even turned Rob's apartment into a DIY operation, spending 10 hours a day packing stickers, CDs, t-shirts, and letters to send out to fans. Even with all the buzz and excitement around it, no one could have predicted just how massive Hybrid Theory would become after its release on October 24th, 2000. It debuted at number 29 on the US Billboard 200, and within a week, it sold 50,000 copies.
The award goes to Linkin Park.
4 weeks later, it was certified gold with 500,000 copies sold, and 2 years later, it was still moving 100,000 copies a week in the US alone. Despite the huge success of Hybrid Theory, the album is often left off lists of the best metal, hard rock, or emo albums. It didn't fit neatly into any one genre. People called Linkin Park nu metal, but that label never really fit. They weren't like Korn or Limp Bizkit. Linkin Park mixed rap, screaming, and electronic sounds in a way that made it hard to put them in one box, and that made them stand out to fans while unsettling the purists.
And then we got in the studio, and like the people were like that we were working with were saying, you know, we wanted you to change this and change that. This guy has this gimmick where he wears a red hat, and you guys need a gimmick. For us, we were just like, come on, man, like what we're doing, there's a very specific lane that we're trying to go down. Like we have a very specific idea for what this is, and it incorporates these different genres of music. I grew up in hip hop. I know hip hop like the back of my hand. It is what I like live and die by, and I want to put this very specific like type of hip hop in the music. And I know these people don't get it, but somebody out there is going to hear this and get it, that it's really, you know, the choices that we're making are what makes this album what it is.
And Chester Bennington wasn't just a frontman. He was a master of dissecting his own mind. He could explain how his anxiety would temporarily fade, only to return as a crushing wave of depression. He likened his mind's final traces of happiness to dirty water swirling down a drain. And that kind of raw honesty made Linkin Park unique.
That record means a lot. It means a lot to us. It means a lot to. It's allowed us to really know that we can stay true to who we are. We can fight for what we want, and we can take chances that we want to take. So it was a very important record for us. It set the bar for us. They're a reflection of where we are creatively. It's the best thing that we could do with our talents at the time. That's what we always had to do. We had to set that bar high, and we learned a lot from making that record, for sure.
Hybrid Theory is loaded with potential singles. Everyone knows Paper Cut, In the End, and Crawling, but the whole album pulses with energy. It's a wild blend of moods: dark, heavy, melodic, and emotional. It's no wonder the album immediately connected with such a wide audience. Hybrid Theory is rightfully hailed as a groundbreaking album, but in the shadow of all that praise lies one of Linkin Park's most overlooked masterpieces, Reanimation. Less than 2 years after their debut, the band unleashed this remix album, which in many ways it's arguably their most underrated work. Reanimation is where they started departing from nu metal, diving headfirst into electronic and experimental sounds. This isn't just a remix album, it's a complete reimagining. It's darker, grittier, and more akin to an underground hip-hop record, blending elements of industrial and electronic music to create a harsher, more jarring sound, one that wouldn't stand a chance on mainstream radio. Vocally, things shift as well. Shinoda's verses come to the forefront, while Bennington's voice often takes a back seat, functioning more as hooks or getting chopped up and remixed into the production. It gives the album a fresh sound that's different from what fans were used to, but no less powerful. I do think they could have trimmed some of the fat here, but overall, it's incredibly solid and criminally underrated. After the success of Hybrid Theory and Reanimation, Linkin Park hit the road, touring across the US. They received invitations to perform at huge events like Ozfest and the Family Values Tour. They even started their own tour, Project Revolution, bringing along artists like Cypress Hill, Edema, and Snoop Dogg. Within a year, they had performed at over 320 concerts. On the surface, Chester was on top of the world, riding the wave of the band's meteoric success. But inside, he was fighting demons no one could see.
Obviously, you have been thinking about the next record.
Well, as far as working on it right now, what we're doing is we're setting up a studio in the back of our bus, We did that on last tour. We're going to do that.
This is becoming really common, right? I mean, I've spoken to a few bands recently who want to record on the road, but they say it's not
yeah,
easy.
but their studios are nothing compared to ours.
Right.
Ours is much bigger and much more elaborate. Well, we're really, I mean, we're really into working with like computer-based recording equipment, and I think we stay pretty on top of it, like as far as the technology.
The band officially announced the production of a new studio album in December 2002, revealing that their new work was inspired by the rocky cliffs of Meteora in Greece, where ancient monasteries sit high above the ground. When Meteora debuted on March 25, 2003, it gained worldwide recognition almost instantly. But by 2003, the music scene was shifting. Rock radio was leaning towards 70s garage rock and pop punk. Bands like Incubus and Deftones, who once were lumped into the new metal movement, were exploring new sounds. Even Limp Bizkit was covering The Who. Everyone seemed to be looking for a way out of new metal, seeking respect in new genres. Let's be real, new metal was never going to win over the music elite. Linkin Park knew this, and it pissed them off. So when they went into the studio for Meteora, they made a choice. They weren't just going to stick to the formula, they were going to evolve, whether anyone liked it or not.
I think Chester was on board first and foremost, maybe even leading the charge on it, is like, let's do it our way or let's not do it. Like he was a champion for that in so many ways, even coming into Meteora.
So they threw everything into the mix. They flipped acoustic guitars backward on Somewhere I Belong and sampled Japanese flutes for Nobody's Listening. These weren't just cheap tricks. They were a middle finger to anyone who said they couldn't experiment. Sure, the songs were more layered, harder to digest at first, but when they landed, they slammed, and nothing hits harder than Faint. Faint isn't just a highlight, it's the moment of the album. It crushes everything else around it, turning skeptics into believers. It's as if the band heard Outkast's B.O.B. and made their own version of it. With breakbeat samples and wild strings, Faint doesn't just demand your attention, it grabs you by the throat. It's undeniable. Then there's Breaking the Habit, a song that stands out for its own reasons. Musically, it's the most beautiful track on the album, mixing a Depeche Mode vibe with big, cinematic, orchestral sounds.
Oh okay, no. Shit, burglar. What is
After Chester Bennington's death in 2017, this song takes on a whole new meaning. The pain in his voice feels all too real now, and it's hard not to hear Breaking the Habit as a cry for help.
Something else.
3, 2, 1, go.
The thing that I remember about Chester, my prevailing top image in my head is this kid who could pull it out of him deep, like Lane Staley deep, like the tar that's in there. But he's so goofy. He was so goofy. Like his humor was so goofy, and at times if he was in that mood, he'd just be this insatiable, like, I've got too many jokes and too many things and too many impressions and too much of this. And that's what I remember is this just like lightness, but then you'd hear him and it'd be like, this guy's got darkness and has to find it. And that's a rare combination.
In recent years, Mike Shinoda has shared how Chester would disappear on wild nights out while touring and come back completely wrecked. It must have been tough for Shinoda and the rest of the band to watch their friend struggle with something so deep. Breaking the Habit was meant to be an instrumental at first, but Shinoda eventually felt compelled to write lyrics. Maybe he hoped the song would reach Chester, showing him he wasn't alone. The band dropped 5 singles from Meteora: Faint, Breaking the Habit, From the Inside, Somewhere I Belong, and the massive Numb. These singles weren't chosen at random. Each one was picked to show that Linkin Park and nu metal were evolving. It was a smart move, and it worked.
Hybrid Theory was like us against the world, like with the story Mike and Dave are recounting. It was like having to fight just to get our actual authentic point of view across. And what was like both so liberating and terrifying about Meteora is like no one effed with us on Meteora.
We got away with it.
It was like, okay, you guys did it. Now, what do you really want to do? And like, this album was the total pure expression of just like, this is us, like delivering, what we want to make. And it was really a fun album to make. Like Hybrid Theory was stressful. This album was awesome. Like It was so great.
Suddenly, they were sharing stages with Metallica, a band that defined metal. And then, just to flip the script again, they teamed up with Jay-Z for Collision Course, an EP that made no sense on paper but worked perfectly in reality. Here's the point, Linkin Park wasn't chasing approval anymore. They were standing alongside the legends they'd been trying to impress, solidifying their place in both rock and rap. And they did it while keeping the fan base that made them stars in the first place.
You know, we were a set of guys who were kind of going through a lot of crazy stuff and trying to figure it out as we went. We'd come home off of these huge world tours, and it would be like, nobody's picked up the dog shit in the backyard for 2 months. So that's now my job. And it was a really quick re-entry into like,
life.
You're not in a rock star band right now. Like, you've got to go do the chores.
Yeah.
This success, however, came with a personal cost for Chester. Back in 1996, he married his first wife, Samantha Marie Olite. They had a child together in 2002, just as Linkin Park was skyrocketing to fame. But with the non-stop touring and the crazy demands of being in the band, Chester's relationship with Samantha began to fall apart. And sadly, by 2005, they ended up divorcing.
Please welcome Dead by Sunrise.
That same year, Chester found another outlet for his emotions by co-founding Dead by Sunrise, an electronic rock band. Though they only released one album, Out of Ashes, in 2009, and it got mixed reviews, it was a project that allowed Chester to explore new musical directions during a tough time in his life. In 2006, Chester married Talinda Ann Bentley, a former Playboy model. Together, they had 3 children, but their happiness was disrupted by a cyberstalker who harassed the couple by tampering with their emails and personal information. This stalker also sent them threatening messages. Thankfully, the person was eventually caught and sentenced to 2 years in prison. All this chaos must have taken a toll on Chester. He battled drugs and alcohol for years, and in 2006, he went to rehab twice. It took everything he had, but he finally kicked the habit and got sober for good.
Life is so weird.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, there are like periods of time where I feel like I've got it, like all my stuff together. You know what I mean? Like, and then there are periods of time where I'm just like, I am such a failure at everything, and I just like, I can't do anything right. Like, I'm a horrible dad, I'm a horrible husband. You know, I'm just like, ugh.
And then came the summer of 2007 when Linkin Park took a bold step with Minutes to Midnight. Co-produced by Mike Shinoda and the legendary Rick Rubin, the album was a big shift from their usual sound.
I'm not sure if the words are making me think of certain melodies, so I wanted to remove the words.
It's funny listening.
Critics weren't exactly praising it, but the sales told a different story. For many diehard fans, this was Linkin Park at their best, taking risks, pushing their boundaries, and proving they weren't stuck in the past. Some of the standout tracks like Shadow of the Day, What I've Done, Leave Out All the Rest, In Between, and Bleed It Out show that even with a new sound, the band still knows how to pull on your heartstrings. The emotions, the passion, and their connection to people going through tough times are all still there, just with sharper songwriting. They followed up with 1,000 Suns in 2010, which was probably their most experimental album yet. This one leaned heavily into electronic and alternative sounds, mixing rap with beats, keyboards, samples, and rhythm loops, while almost completely cutting out electric guitars.
And we would all fight amongst ourselves, but at the end of it, it was like, let's figure out how we want to do it, and if that's not going to work, then we don't want to do it. Like, let's make sure that we love it, and then we can put it out there and be confident in the fact that at least the 6 of us are on board, and we hope you like it. We hope you love it. But if not, we've done all we can do, instead of like the reverse of that, which is kind of listening to the outside ideas and kind of getting that weird feeling in your stomach of like, I don't know if this is how I want to do this. I don't know if this is how I want to create or approach this process.
I think that's one thing.
While fans love the album today, back when it first dropped, it was a lot to take in. Many people didn't fully get it or appreciate just how different it was. Say what you want about Linkin Park, but they made a choice to grow with their audience, adapt to the times, and keep pushing boundaries.
You gotta impress yourself first. You gotta make the songs that you go, damn, that's a good song. Like, if no one else likes that song, I know I'm on good footing because I think it's great.
But see, these are the decisions that get made.
Living Things, released in 2012, was a continuation of the experimental route they'd set with 1,000 Suns, blending electronic and rock in a way that had critics nodding with approval. The production was sharp, the sound was a mix of the old aggressive style and new electronic influences. But fans were divided. Some embraced the balance of styles, while others were left wanting more of that hard-hitting new metal punch.
And with this album, we weren't really necessarily talking about social issues. We were talking about relationships. We were talking about human emotions. I think the only thing that we really tried to put into this album was something that Mike and I had talked about when we were touring, was let's write a bunch of songs that would be fun to play live and keep the energy up and be exciting for our fans to get into, which kind of inspired us to go back to, you know, some of the things that some of our earlier fans would be more familiar with, some of the things that we may have alienated them in some respects over the last couple albums with 1,000 Suns and with Minutes to Midnight. We've gone back to a couple of the stylistic things that people who got into us early in our career would be more familiar with, and we mix those with some of the things that we've learned since we began working with Rick Rubin.
The Hunting Party, released 2 years later, felt like a rebellion. It was a direct response to the softer, electronic vibes of their previous albums. The band brought the guitars back in full force, delivering an album that was raw, aggressive, and unapologetically loud. Some fans hailed it as a return to form, while critics saw it as a bold statement against the watered-down trends in mainstream rock, although some argued it lacked the innovation they'd come to expect from Linkin Park. Then came One More Light in 2017, which shocked everyone. One More Light got a mixed to negative response when it came out in 2017. The main issue for critics and fans was that it sounded more like a pop album than what they were expecting from Linkin Park.
So it seems that this new Linkin Park album, it's not good. This is the opposite of what a band of Linkin Park's history and caliber should be doing at this point in their career. It's like they're trying too hard to appeal to a generation of listeners who it's just not going to happen. It's never going to happen. All you're going to do is alienate and tick off the listeners who have stuck with you from back in the day. And believe me, at this point, you want those people to continue riding with you. You don't want to shake that boat. You don't want to kick them off the bus, because they're going to leave if you come out with another album like this. They're going to go.
Despite this, it did well commercially, debuting at #1 on the Billboard 200, showing that the band still had a strong fan base.
There's a reason why all 6 of us voted for those tracks. It's because they're amazing songs, dude. Like, I was even trying to just sing like a whatever vocal in here for One More Light, dude. I started fucking crying, dude. You know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of record we're making.
But the reception highlighted the challenge artists face when changing their sound and identity. What's baffling is why a band with such a versatile history, from nu metal and rap rock to grand symphonic pop rock, caught so much backlash for doing something different. If these 10 songs had been spread out as occasional ballads on future albums, more fans probably would have embraced them. Instead, the fact that all these pop songs were crammed into one 40-minute album seemed to be what set people off. They were so hung up on the idea of a soft Linkin Park that they didn't even give the album a fair shot. For those who do give One More Light an open-minded listen, there's plenty to like. The catchy choruses in Good Goodbye, the beautiful guest vocals from Kiara on Heavy, the thoughtful lyrics in Halfway Right, and the unique vibe of Sharp Edges all show that the band could still make great music, whatever style they choose to adapt.
This morning, the music world is remembering grunge rock pioneer Chris Cornell.
Breaking news update. In the last 15 minutes, the medical examiner has confirmed that rocker Chris Cornell has committed suicide.
On May 26th, a week after One More Light dropped, Chester Bennington found himself giving the most raw, heart-wrenching performance of his life. His close friend Chris Cornell, the voice of Soundgarden, was being laid to rest at Hollywood Forever Cemetery. Cornell had unalived himself after a lifelong battle with depression. Chester stood before the mourners, and his voice cracked with emotion as he sang Hallelujah for his friend. That day, his voice was different, plaintive, somber, and more fragile than ever. He also paid tribute to his friend on Twitter. Your voice was joy and pain, anger and forgiveness, love and heartache, all wrapped up into one, and I suppose that's what we all are. You helped me understand that. And then, 64 days later, Chester tragically unalived himself.
Bennington was found dead in a home near Los Angeles Thursday morning. Authorities say it may have been suicide.
In the days before his death, Chester had been in Arizona, trying to find a bit of peace with Talinda and the kids at their cabin in Sedona. It was a family escape before Linkin Park's massive North American tour was set to kick off later that month.
Something else.
3, 2, 1, go.
But Chester didn't stay long. He went back to Los Angeles alone, saying he had work to do. Before he left, Talinda captured what would become a haunting memory. A photo of Chester and their kids standing on the deck, grinning from ear to ear as they looked out into the woods. A picture that now feels like a final moment of happiness. On the morning of July 20th, Chester Bennington was found dead by hanging in his home. The date was significant. It was the birthday of his close friend, Chris Cornell. Just a month earlier, Chester had confided in his friend Ryan Shuck, who played guitar in his side project Dead by Sunrise, that he was struggling with alcohol addiction again and fighting hard to get sober. Despite this, family and friends said that Chester seemed to be in good spirits, happy, energized, and excited for the upcoming tour. We'll never know for sure if his decision was something he had planned or a tragic impulse, but there's something worth noting. When someone struggling with suicidal thoughts seems suddenly cheerful or relieved, it can be a dangerous sign.
I either got rotten egg or something else.
3, 2, 1, go.
It's a change that often occurs when they've made up their mind, and it's one of the most critical warnings to look out for.
He was at his best before he passed. We were on a family vacation. He just had to go back home to do a television commercial, and I was going to see him the next day. It was just the timing of it. You know, he had been in states of depression before, and he had had past attempts. This was not a time where any of our families suspected this to happen, which is terrifying, you know, because it could happen at any moment with those thoughts.
Following Chester's death, blog posts and message board discussions started popping up, with many suggesting that One More Light was a cry for help that had gone unnoticed. Conspiracy theories quickly arose, claiming that Chester and Chris Cornell didn't just die by tragic coincidence. According to some, the two were deliberately taken out because they were secretly working to expose a dark network of abusers. "We're trying to remind ourselves," the band wrote to Chester following his death, "that the demons who took you away from us were always part of the deal. After all, it was the way you sang about those demons that made everyone fall in love with you in the first place."
Did you doubt at any time that, like, oh, now Chester's gone, maybe I don't want to do music anymore? Was there any of that?
Yeah.
No.
Of course. 100%. 100%. It's like, for me, it just felt like too much. Like to get back on it and try and do some version of music and also be seen through the lens of what had happened.
Yeah.
Like for that to be attached. It was like being a member of a club that I didn't want to join.
The truth is, we'll never know why the darkness that haunted Chester his entire life won out on July 20th, 2017. From the outside, he was a beacon of light, spending time with family, sharing laughs with friends, practicing his new songs, and getting ready for his tour. But all of that fought against years of deep trauma, addiction battles, and crushing depression. To suggest there's a simple reason for his death or to claim his music was some kind of warning we all missed is to ignore the complexity of his struggle. There are no neat explanations, and there never will be. Chester Bennington's legacy is one of strength, emotion, and lasting influence in the world of music. As the frontman of Linkin Park, he became a voice for a generation, turning his struggles with pain, addiction, and mental health into powerful lyrics that resonated with fans everywhere. His voice, with its mix of raw emotion and intensity, helped shape rock music in the early 2000s, creating a unique sound that blended metal, hip-hop, and alternative rock. But Chester's impact went beyond the music. He challenged us all to be real about our struggles. His openness about addiction, pain, and mental health issues sparked conversations and inspired countless people to seek help. The vulnerability and strength he put into his art still live on through his songs, reminding us that even the darkest battles can give birth to something beautiful.
Guy with glasses whose voice was adored by millions. The vocalist of a legendary band which was the meaning of life for all teenagers in the early and mid-2000s. His tragic story can still bring tears today, but it can also inspire and remind everyone that people live as long as they are remembered. Why didn't he even have a sofa, although his songs were played 24 hours a day on radio and television? How did he change nu metal forever? And why did the life of the mortally wounded soul of Chester Charles Bennington end? You will learn about this and much more in today's video. This is the Enco Stories channel, and we are starting. Say what you want about me as a person. Say what you want about me as a creator. I don't care. I know exactly who I am. I know exactly what I'm made of. And everything suits me. Chester Charles Bennington was born on March 20th, 1976 in Phoenix, Arizona. His mother, Susan Elaine Johnson, worked as a nurse, and his father, Lee Russell, was a police detective. From an early age, his parents noticed their son's inclination to art. Barely learning to speak, little Chester confidently said that he would become an actor or a rock star in the future. The first song he memorized at the age of 2 was the hard rock hit Hot Blooded by Foreigner, which he heard on his older brother's tape recorder. And in a few years, he learned and sang all the songs from the children's musical film about the sailor Popeye. Chester grew up a happy child. His sparkling brown eyes mesmerized adults, but a cruel world ruined his childhood and perhaps his whole life. When he was 7 years old, he faced a tragedy that he could not tell anyone about, but which left its mark on his whole life. It's about violence of intimate nature. Chester had an older friend who took an unhealthy interest in him, although at first it all looked like a very unfortunate and unfunny joke. It escalated from a touchy, curious, what does this thing do, into full-on crazy violations. I was getting beaten up and being forced to do things I didn't want to do. It destroyed my self-confidence. The horror did not end, but repeated again and again, year after year, until Chester turned 13. At first, he was too scared to tell anyone, afraid that he would not be believed. In a bitter irony, his father had encountered similar cases at work more than once, but was so busy that he did not notice the horror that his son experienced every day. The fact that his parents divorced when he was 11 added up to the existing stress. Chester and his sister stayed with their father, and his older brother and another sister stayed with their mother. The only friend to whom Chester could tell everything, and even the most terrible thoughts, was a blank sheet of paper. The drawings, the first clumsy but honest poems, all this was an echo of his inner pain. One day, some of these poems will be turned into songs, and millions of people will be able to understand and share his pain. In addition to these problems, there was also bullying at school. Chester was clumsy, shy, very thin, wore glasses, and was often bullied. Only music saved him from all problems.
I would say that music has probably kept me alive, more so than anything else. I mean, other than, love from your friends and family, I think that music is probably the reason why I still am here, because that is how I get out a lot of the stuff that's going on inside of me, and that's how I kind of work through a lot of things. I reflect on my life, I reflect on how I feel.
It was difficult at school, especially since he and his father often had to move from one town to another. His only friends were outcasts like himself, but he also had successes. The boy showed good results in sports and regularly and with a huge margin won in athletic competitions. Furthermore, Chester enjoyed playing in a children's musical theater troupe, which gave him his first experience of performing in front of large crowds. I didn't realize I could sing very well, but I knew I could sing pretty good. I was actually very involved in theater before I got bit by the lead singer bug, and that was what I actually thought I was going to do professionally. And although Chester's soul really lay in acting, and in the future he would get several episodic roles in movies, his true passion was singing. Although he quickly lost interest in sports, Chester trained his voice constantly and tirelessly. Eventually, he would learn to scream like a devil and sing like an angel. Music brought salvation, but on the other hand, there were personal troubles, constant quarrels at home, severe childhood trauma, and bullying from classmates. In order to somehow escape from reality at a fairly young age, he began to use, drank a lot, and sometimes resembled a living skeleton. I'd become a person that wasn't me. This is me. I'm a nice, friendly guy that always stuck behind this monster that was just really a hurt kid. An important moment in his life was the day when Chester won the school song contest performing A Question of Lust by Depeche Mode. Of course, this was just a school competition, but probably for the first time, his classmates looked at him with admiration. Shortly after, at a party, Chester met a guy with a guitar named Jason. Chester couldn't hide his interest in the instrument, so they got acquainted, and it turned out that Jason was looking for someone who could sing. They got together a few times to play guitar, then started thinking of getting a microphone, and remembered that there was one in a local church that wasn't too hard to get into. They took out a microphone, came to Jason's house, and played every song by the Doors that they knew. These gatherings took place at least 3 times a week. Most of the time they enjoyed music. The rest of the time was devoted to the same substances and alcohol. Nevertheless, the constant presence of a like-minded person and music made Chester more relaxed and more confident. He became less and less shy, More and more often attracted all the attention at parties, and soon people started talking about him as that talented dude who was always under something.
Right when you think you've got it all figured out and everything's good, it just comes and kicks you right in the nuts. And then every time you think it can't get any worse and that life sucks and it's never gonna get better, all of a sudden, the sun comes a-shining.
Somehow, Jason found out the local band Sean Dowdle and his friends was looking for a vocalist and arranged auditions. Chester not only passed it brilliantly, everyone was so impressed that they immediately took him into the band without even listening to the rest of the candidates. After so many years of bullying, failure, Chester finally found people who appreciated him and admired his talent. In 1992, they formed the band, with Chester on lead vocals, Jason on bass, Chris Goad on guitar, and Sean Dowdle on drums. The boys wanted Chester in their band so badly that Sean even came to ask his father for permission. He, of course, was not delighted with the offer, but showed angelic patience and said that if Chester would study normally, then he would not mind. In about a year, the band put together a demo tape with 3 of their own songs. They also learned to play a huge number of covers for Nirvana, Ramones, Stone Temple Pilots, Guns N' Roses, and managed to give more than 70 concerts with this material. Then, their music sounded like this. They played their first full gig when Chester was just 14. It was a crazy party, and they played about 50 covers in 3 hours. Nevertheless, this was the maximum that the band managed. After a while, it fell apart, but very soon, Sean assembled a new lineup and invited Chester to join him again. The band was originally called Lovely's Bleeding. Later, they changed their name to Gray Days. The first performance of the new lineup took place in 1994 in Scottsdale. The concerts followed one after the other, and the first recording contract was already looming on the horizon. They were lucky and found producer David Nauer, who invested about $10,000 in the recording of their first album. This led to the release of the record Wake Me, and also provided them with their first rotations on the radio. Chester's gloomy lyrics did not surprise anyone at the time. It was typical of the genre in general. But only close people knew that these texts were not an attempt to follow the canons of this genre or to provoke. In fact, it was the cry of a mortally wounded soul. In 1995, they released the album. The band underwent a transformation, after which the final lineup of Great Days was born. Mace Byers played the bass and Bobby Binish took over the guitar. During this period, everything was going well. Chester assembled the band and also found love. On January 28, 1996, Chester met Samantha Marie Ollett, who became his wife a few months later. They got married on Halloween of the same year, but their financial situation was so bad that the newlyweds could not even buy wedding rings, so they tattooed them on their fingers. It's worth saying that this was not Chester's first relationship. Moreover, at that time he already had a 1-year-old son, Isaiah, from a former girlfriend, whose name was Yelka Brand. Both were not destined to be happy in this relationship. But Chester took care of his son and tried to give him everything that he lacked in his childhood. Real popularity and the first set of money were still far away, so Chester had to work wherever he was needed. He swept leaves for $4 an hour, worked at Burger King, and at the same time did everything to break into the music industry. The band often performed, but these concerts were almost for charity. Simultaneously, they wrote a new album, which was released in 1997. The album No Sun Today somewhat improved their position, and the themes of the songs shifted from personal to socio-political. The concerts became massive. The first fans appeared, and Chester signed autographs for the first time. Although sometimes it took hours. But although the band became quite famous in Arizona, the label was not interested in a third album. Tension grew between the members, which led to the band's breakup in 1998. Before continuing Chester's story, we need to move to Los Angeles, where another talented teenager grew up. His name was Michael Kinji Shinoda. Unlike Chester, Shinoda's childhood was quite normal. His parents lived together and always supported and encouraged their son's passion. From the age of 6, he played the piano, sang in a children's theater group, and wrote his first song when he was 11 years old. He had to leave piano lessons because his teacher did not share Shinoda's passion for hip-hop, especially the music of his idol, Dr. Dre. She just couldn't teach him to write music like that. At the age of 16, Shinoda was given a sampler and he began creating his own music, to which he rapped. Michael was a friend of Bradford Delson, who also took music lessons from an early age, was obsessed with Metallica, and formed his first band called The Pricks. The band also included his neighbor, Mark Wakefield. Later, Mike, Mark, and Brad met a young Robert Gregory Burden, who started a new band called Relative Degree. Mike attended their sessions just to watch Rob play and pick up interesting samples for their songs. In the winter of 1995 to 1996, Mike and Mark formed a new band called Zero, with the intention of making music that combined their passion for rock and hip-hop. With this idea, they recorded their first demo, and fate brought them together with producer Jeff Blue. Jeff was able to see the band's potential, so he offered them a deal with a little financial backing, $4,000 up front and $1,000 for a demo recording. Despite the arguments between Mike and Mark about who would be the leader of the band, they signed the contract. This allowed them to buy new instruments and equipment to enhance their live performances. By the way, at the same time, the band Papa Roach also tried to sign a deal with Jeff, but the producer preferred Zero. In early 1999, a representative of the band Zero, who was handling the contract, was drinking at a bar with Jeff Blue. There was Grey Goose vodka on their table, so both remembered a good band that broke up not so long ago, Grey Days. They also remembered Chester, who at that time was far from music and was busy with his family. Without thinking long, they called Chester directly from the bar and offered him a place in the band. It happened on the eve of his birthday, so Chester took the offer as a real gift from fate. He was sent tapes to check out the Zero material and send them his own interpretation of some of the tracks. Chester was not only blown away by the sound, he had never heard anything like it, so he immediately knew he wanted to be a part of it.
So I like the way it starts off. It's kind of mellow, you aren't quite sure where they're going with it. It's a good intro for radio too, it could be a nice radio edit.
The next day, Chester left his own birthday party and called Mike Jones asking for permission to use his studio. Mike had previously worked with Grey Days, recorded their first demos, but that wasn't enough to allow Chester to record due to an old friendship. The studio cost $100 an hour, so Bennington had to record his demos at the Conservatory of Recording Arts and Sciences. 2 days later, he called Jeff, said it was ready, put the phone next to the tape recorder and played what came out. What I heard floored me. Every crack of his voice had a story to tell. It was iconic, genuine, vulnerable, urgent, beautiful, and hits you in the gut. I immediately called Brad and Mike and told them I was flying Chester out to Los Angeles. Chester understood very well that this opportunity should not be lost. Although the decision was not easy, firstly, he left his wife at home. Secondly, he quit his stable job and went almost nowhere. However, he quit the job immediately after his boss assured him that he would be able to return if things went wrong in California. So, already on Monday, Chester was in Los Angeles, met the band, and gave them his tape. Everyone was delighted, but at the same time, they had to listen to several more candidates for the role of vocalist. One day, a guy who was supposed to sing right after Chester came to the audition. After hearing Bennington's voice, the boy refused to audition and said they would be idiots if they didn't take Chester right now. He was really skinny with glasses, and he was wearing this awful butterfly collar shirt that hung all over him. It made him look like a cheesy guy from an Arizona nightclub bar. But his vocals on our demo were incredible. He sang like a fucking beast, the same way he sings now. Not even knowing what success awaits them in the near future, they had dinner at a local pizzeria, took their first photo, and started working the next day. Mike Shinoda knew from the first meeting that Chester Bennington would change his life. Chester gave his all, and his energy was contagious to all the other participants. It may seem like Chester's life had finally turned on the bright side, but in reality, things weren't so rosy at first. He risked everything and for the first time literally lived like a homeless person. He spent nights at the studio, at friends, and slept in the car. But this did not scare him away. On the contrary, it motivated him to work harder and harder. And later, the situation improved.
I mean, I was like, F the world when we started this, and now I'm like, I love you! I'm looking outside like, oh, the birds in my car. You know, look at that. That's funny. That's so cool.
Moreover, he seemed to have found a best friend. It was growing closer to Shinoda, with whom he adored writing songs. No matter how different their pasts were, when they sat down to write, magic happened. In both memories, it felt like a session of psychotherapy, especially given how intimate Chester's lyrics were. Some of his lyrics addressed that stuff, the abuse. So when he and I were talking about the songs, he told me about it. It was a weird way to get to know each other, but that's how it happened. Mike Shinoda said that the only person he spent more time with than Chester was his wife. It wasn't friendship at first sight, but the more time they spent together, the more Chester opened up to Shinoda.
I've never heard such a crazy upbringing, like such a crazy childhood, like running wild, like in the streets and doing hard drugs on the roof of his high school, just like complete, like just barely staying out of jail. And so different. And that's what made our dynamic what it was. It's like, I didn't grow up like that.
Mike knew his past, understood his inner state, and even wrote songs about it. Chester said that one of his favorite Linkin Park songs is Breaking the Habit, which Mike wrote. Its words resonated with Chester so much that he kept interrupting the recording because he couldn't hold back the tears. Nevertheless, Chester recorded all the vocal parts in one day. The debut album was called Hybrid Theory and was independently published by the band with a circulation of 1,500 discs. The band, with Chester on vocals, was for a while named the same as their first album, but later, that too was changed. Realizing that no one knew them yet, they let everyone download the songs for free on their website. Moreover, they went to music forums and chat rooms in order to promote their music. The guys were not too shy to engage in their own promotion. Sometimes they entered the popular chat of the Korn band and wrote something like, "A new band has appeared. Hybrid Theory. Rate it." Between August 1999 and May 2000, the band played in several clubs in California and Arizona. On August 27, 1999, they were invited to the Big Fish Pub in Tempe, the same club where Grey Days had last performed a year earlier. Unfortunately, their performances did not have much success. Besides, they continued to hear rejections from record companies, and no prospects were foreseen. They sincerely thought that they had invented a unique style, but while they were on their way to the top, quite a few bands appeared before their eyes that combined both rap and rock in their music. Then they decided that they would simply be the best of them. Surprisingly, this simple strategy soon paid off, and in 1999 they finally signed a contract with Warner Bros. Records. The first problem was the name. Warner already had a band called Hybrid, so each member came up with about 30 names, and then everyone voted on the best one. If the guys had a different mindset, today we might know Linkin Park as Clear, Probing Loggers, or Platinum Lotus Foundation. Chester came up with the name Linkin Park when he drove past the park of the same name in his hometown. Then appeared a new problem with this name. There were a lot of such parks in the United States, and a domain with such a name would cost $10,000. With the rest, they found a free domain, Lincoln, for $10. And on May 24, 2000, they registered the domain linkinpark.com. The first show they performed under the new and final name was June 9, 2000 in West Hollywood. Then they gathered about 30 people, mostly their friends. Free musicians who were used to doing everything on their own could not avoid conflict with serious people from the label who sought to control everything. For example, the label wanted the charismatic Chester to front the band, but he refused because he thought it was unfair. Furthermore, the label tried to edit the songs. They wanted to change Mike's style to make him look like Fred Durst from Limp Bizkit. The label created many difficulties, but the more time the guys spent in the studio, the stronger was the bond between them. They continued to work on their music and their style without losing their own authenticity and without listening to stupid advice. The album was written at a marathon pace. Mike and Chester were both exhausted and happy. All the pressure they felt from the producers was poured into the song that eventually brought them their first notable success. On October 3, 2000, the guys went to the nearest 24-hour store and waited until midnight to be the first to buy a copy of their debut album. They were trying to guess how many copies they could sell. Someone said about 3,000. Chester was a real optimist and said 8,000. By the way, if you want, you can pause and write your version in the comments. How many copies did they manage to sell? We'll tell you the correct answer in a moment. Everyone was wrong. In the first week, the album sold 50,000 copies, which greatly exceeded all their expectations. The album broke sales records in the United States, and Linkin Park almost instantly became the idols of all teenagers. The album consists of hits including the band's most famous, most recognizable composition, In the End. Even if you're not a fan, you'll 100% recognize this song from the first few seconds. It's interesting that both Mike and Chester called it the most pop song of Linkin Park, although at first it did not have a name, but it had every chance of not even getting on the album. The central idea of the composition is hidden in the chorus, and the words, "I tried so hard and got so far, but in the end, it doesn't even matter." On the one hand, quite depressing. On the other hand, quite motivating. It is in this uncertainty, according to Shinoda, that the meaning of the song is hidden. Of course, every fan managed to find something of his own, but the text directly refers to the long journey that the band took during the first few years of its existence. The song is a real treasure for various interpretations, but it is obvious that it is directly related to the disappointments that not only each member of the band faced, but also any person in general. Chester wasn't too fond of the song at first, but grew to love it as he realized how important it was to the band's fans. Another reason, or result, of such popularity can be considered the fact that the song was performed literally at every concert. Dozens of covers of this hit contributed to this, from the band itself to rappers like Jay-Z. It's safe to say that the album was destined for success, although the musicians doubted it. In addition to good music that literally pushed the boundaries of the genre, the album was also filled with strong lyrics in which they were not shy in talking about their problems. This is what made the band the voice of the teenagers of that generation, and what led to the formation of one of the largest and most famous fandoms in the history of music. There is one story that perfectly demonstrates how much their popularity grew after the album release. On November 11th, Linkin Park was supposed to perform at a sponsored concert, which was supposed to take place in the parking lot of a shopping center. But instead of 500 spectators, 5,000 people came. And while the area around the parking lot was paralyzed by traffic jams, the new stars calmly prepared for the performance.
Forfeit the game before somebody else takes you out of the frame. Put your name to shame, cover up your face. You can't run the race, the pace is too fast, you just won't last. Come on.
In honor of the album going platinum, Chester got a Linkin Park tattoo on his back. He later got another tattoo dedicated to the band, a soldier from the cover of Hybrid Theory on his left leg. In general, Chester's photos show that he was a fan of tattoos. He first tattooed a carp on his right bicep when he was 18 years old. His zodiac sign, Pisces, is tattooed on his left bicep. A zombie gypsy can be seen on his right arm, a pirate's skull on one elbow, and a skull with a web and a rose on the other. On his back were 2 dragons and a 6-armed witch, and on his ring finger was the wedding ring we already mentioned. In July 2000, he got a flame tattoo on his wrists, which became his trademark. This world had fascinated him since his teenage years, and Chester said that tattoos were important to him because they were pain and pleasure at the same time. In 2002, Chester became a father again. Samantha gave birth to his son, Draven Sebastian. And from the outside, it seemed that Bennington was living his best life. Unfortunately, this feeling was misleading. Reaping the fruits of the long-awaited success, the band gave concert after concert and simultaneously